Egypt is a land of math, legend, and a mystery. Its history goes back so far that we think of Cleopatra as ancient. And yet to Cleopatra, the pyramids were already so ancient that she had archaeologists investigate, though ancient Egypt was unlike any other country in the world, and there's still much that we don't know about. Some of its greatest mysteries are here in this video. We tend to think of Tutankhamun as the boy king, because of his tender age. But Tutankhamun was old enough to have children of his own. We know that because we found 2 of them. Sadly, they didn't live very long. The children, both of whom were girls, were buried in their father's tomb. And so were discovered when it was opened by Howard Carter in 1922. The inscriptions on their tiny coffins refer to them only as the Ulcerans, meaning the deceased. So we don't even know their names. Somewhat inauspiciously, they're now known as mummies. 317A and 317B. The mother of the girls was probably Tutankhamun's wife Ankhez Edelman, who might be the mummy currently labeled TV21A. Mummy 317A was born prematurely after only 5 or 6 months gestation, whereas 317 baby was born at or near full term. Their appearance is unusual. And while conditions like spina bifida and Strangel's deformity have been suggested as possible causes, neither can be confirmed. In fact, scientists have never been able to determine what the cause of death was for either child. We know the names of many of the pharaohs and rulers of ancient Egypt. We don't know them all. For example, we have no idea whose smashed head we're looking at in these images. The statue head is approximately 4,300 years old and was found in the ancient city of Hazar, in what's now Israel. Historians believe it was made at around the same time the pyramids were built and was destroyed along with the rest of Zora around 3,300 years ago, when Israeli forces led by Joshua attacked the city. It's possible to confirm that this is a depiction of a pharaoh because of the curled capwig on its head, which is topped by a uraeus in Egyptian iconography, or uraeus is a solar cobra that rises from above the forehead of a pharaoh. It's unheard of for such a feature to be included in a sculpture of anyone who wasn't a pharaoh. There's little doubt that the head was once attached to a larger sculpture, but the rest of the body has never been found. Other Egyptian sculptures have been found in the ruins of his sword, indicating that the city may have been allied to Egypt despite not being considered Egyptian territory. But the nature of this relationship is unknown, as is the identity of the mystery pharaoh. Almost every civilization in the world has legends about giants who once lived and walked among them. But mighty giant once have been the king of Egypt. Perhaps we can find out by studying the remains of King Senna, a 3rd dynasty pharaoh who ruled Egypt around 4,700 years ago. His remains were found inside a tomb close to be collapsed in 1901 and are remarkable because of their size. Based on his skeleton, the pharaoh was around 6 feet 6 inches tall. The average height of a human male during that time period was more like 5 feet 6 inches, sort of the people around him. Sanik would have appeared to be a giant. Even Ramses II, who history records as being tall, only reached 5 feet 9 inches tall. Analysis of the pharaoh's bones is confirmed that he had gigantic Cisco and would have appeared even larger than he was. He's the earliest known human to have had this medical condition. Might all the other contemporary accounts of giants from the era have referred to people with gigantism too? Or were there other giants to be found in ancient times aside from this towering king? We might as well refer to the entire country of Egypt as an archaeological site. There are ancient statues, temples and other artifacts all over the nation, and it seems we'll never get done finding them. Archaeologists work on Egyptian sites every day, but they don't get to make all the discoveries. In 2019, drilling work on a sewage drain in Tarna Sohag had to be called to a sudden halt when workers realized they've accidentally broken into an ancient temple. Archaeologists were summoned immediately, and they were overjoyed when they realized that the workers had stumbled across the long-lost temple of Ptolemy IV, which was now open to the air for the first time in 2,200 years. Told him he isn't remembered by history as a successful or popular pharaoh. He was said to be more interested in art than he was in governing, which might explain why his temple is in an out-of-the-way location on the western bank of the Nile. On the other hand, he did build the largest human-powered sailing vessel ever made at Sara Contreras with a crew of 4,000. Looking inside a museum for strange artifacts might feel a bit like cheating, but it's worth it. In the case of this ancient Egyptian funerary stela, It's currently in the University of Liverpool's Garstang Museum in England. The intricately carved and detailed stone slab commemorates a priest called Imani Sonnet, who lived in Egypt during the days of the Middle Kingdom, 3,500 years ago. The hieroglyphs on the stellar had been described as an offering formula, a magical text that when read aloud, magically provides the soul of the deceased with as much food and drink as they require to sustain them in the afterlife. Stones like these were left in easy-to-see locations in the hope that whoever walked past them might charitably speak the words and thus ensure the dead were catered for. When many of these stones were positioned close to each other, the Egyptians called them cenotaph, a phrase we still use today. What makes this doubly unique is the multiple illustrations it comes with, arranged in panels almost like a comic strip. They probably show a man going about his daily tasks of life. But it's a mystery that these illustrations were considered to be an appropriate tribute to him when they don't appear on any other funerary stellar that we know of. The Palermo stone is in some ways the oldest history book in the world. It's called the Palermo stone because of the city in which it was found, in the capital city of Sicily in 1877. But it's not Italian or Sicilian in origin. The stone is Egyptian's, and the information inscribed upon its surface tells us the history of the first 5 dynasties of ancient Egypt, beginning in the year 2925 BCE. And tracking important events through to 2325 BCE. That means it must have been created somewhere close to the year 2325 BCE. So how accurate the information about the events that happened 600 years earlier might be is unknown. How the artifact ended up in Palermo is known, but it's only a single fragment of what would have been a much larger stellar. Experts estimate that the full piece would have been 6 feet long and probably stood in a temple. Only information about some events in Egyptian history, including the invasion of Nubia during the reign of Snefru, comes from this object. The stone tells us that Snefru's forces came back from their invasion with 2,000 stolen cattle and 7,000 Nubian slaves, but that might either be a boast or an exaggeration. The shift, sometimes known as the Cebu disc, has been considered an unexplained Egyptian artifact ever since it was unearthed in North Saqqara in 1936. The oddly shaped trilobe disc has been called everything from a candlestick holder to the driving wheel of an interstellar spacecraft. As it's 5,000 years old, some people think that it might prove that the Egyptians invented the wheel a very long time before we currently believe they did. The disc is 2 feet in diameter and barely 1 inch thick. It's also made from a very delicate form of rock which would crack and shatter from one wrong move during the construction phase. Someone took great care in making it, but why we've never found anything else in Egypt that looks even vaguely like it. We'd love it to be a piece of alien technology. But it could just as easily be an old oil, and you can go and check it out at the Cairo Museum if you want to try solving the mystery yourself. A more recent theory suggests that it may have been a mash rake used to even out the mixture of grains and hot water in the brewing of beer. Surely it's too elaborate for that. Mysteries in Egypt don't come much bigger than the Serapeum of Saqqara. That's the name given to a collection of 24 jet black 100-ton granite boxes hidden in a hillside to the south of Giza, is Great Pyramid. The gargantuan sarcophagi appear to have been interred in their current position somewhere around 3,300 years ago, during a time when the legendary pharaoh Ramesses II was on Egypt's throne. Some of the boxes have been opened and found to contain the remains of Apis bowls. Bowls were sacred to the ancient Egyptians, or if they wouldn't usually be buried with such honors. One of the most controversial theories about their design and purpose is that they were used for fermentation, which would have generated sufficient stress within the sarcophagus to create a luminous glow inside the dark tunnels. In other words, they might have been a primitive, but astonishing form of lighting. With the boxes that glow, the tunnels would have been illuminated so that workers could decorate the walls around them. The majority of Egyptologists reject this idea out of hand. They don't have any better explanations of their own. We haven't talked much about the pyramids of Egypt yet. So let's change that. Now, here's an Egyptian pyramid you probably haven't heard much about before, even though it's older than all the rest. It's the Pyramid of Josselin, and it's the oldest large stone monument in the world. We believe it was built more than 1,000 years ago, and was made to entomb the remains of the great pharaoh Djoser. The 200-foot-tall pyramid is made of over 11 million square feet of clay and stone, and the design work is generally credited to the legendary Egyptian polymath Imhotep. Nobody has ever built anything like this before, and it has not been built. The Egyptians would probably have never gone on to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. Once upon a time, it was surrounded by a larger walled complex containing temples and a courtyard. Secrecy was clearly important to him. Hotep. There are no less than 13 fake doors to the pyramid's interior located around the perimeter. We may never know what truly lies inside. The Egyptian government doesn't allow anybody to enter. We've talked about some of the sadder contents of Tutankhamun's tomb, but one of the more curious objects Howard Carter discovered in the tomb was a tiny scarab brooch. It's a beautiful decorative object, but it'd be considered a minor detail if it weren't for the material that it's made from. The yellow-brown scarab contains a yellow silica glass stone taken from the sand of the Sahara, then polished by a skilled craftsperson. The glass is about 28 million years old and was created when a comet hit the desert with such force. The sand was heated to a temperature of around 2000 degrees Celsius, thus forming glass. Fragments of this ancient glass can still be found scattered across 6,000 square miles of the Sahara Desert today. The Egyptians were years ahead of their time when it came to astronomy. So it's possible that they were aware of the extraterrestrial influences that resulted in the creation of this glass. That might be a stretch, but it seems they knew there was something special about it. They didn't, it wouldn't have become the centerpiece of jewelry made for a camp. There are so many ancient artifacts buried in Egypt that we may never find all of them. Even though hundreds of archaeological sites in the country had been fully excavated over the years. There's always a new one for experts to sink their teeth into. A sarcophagus that turned up at a construction site in Alexandria in July 2018 is a great example. The 2,300-year-old black sarcophagus dates back to the Ptolemaic period and was found 16 feet below ground level by workers from the Supreme Council of Antiquities and City. Gabbard is they built new offices in the area. The coffin is still sealed, but a heavily weathered bust found alongside it might have provided a clue as to who the occupant might be, if it were in better condition. Sadly, time and nature have eroded the bust very badly. Only wealthy people from that era would have been buried in such a heavy black granite sarcophagus. So when the 15-ton lid of the casket is finally lifted away, we may find that it contains the remains of a long-lost leader. Perhaps even Alexander the Great. Don't hold your breath waiting to find out, though full excavation may take 5 years. Even with all the tombs and burial sites that have been discovered in Egypt, there are still several missing pharaohs hiding somewhere beneath the sand or below buildings. The tomb of the boy king Thutmose II, who was only 13 when he became pharaoh, has eluded experts for a very long time. Now it seems they might finally be getting closer. And all because of the discovery of an ancient goose. The goose was found inside a 3,500-year-old stone box at Deir al-Buhari and appears to have been sacrificed. It's not the goose that's interesting though. It's the fact that it was buried with a wooden chest upon which the name of Thutmose II is inscribed. The boy king ruled for only 3 years, so he is historically significant. But he was briefly married to the legendary Queen Hatshepsut, so his presumably untouched term ought to be filled with incredible treasures. Items like this often serve as grave mark, and so archaeologists are now hoping the long cipher tomb is somewhere very nearby. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.